Welcome everyone. This is a really, really exciting evening. We've already done one evening, but this is really the book launch of Healing Pathways, my mother, Mindy Wiesenberg's new book. And it's an incredibly, incredibly exciting evening that she is going to share ideas and some very important ideas from her book. I want to begin the evening, we're going to begin the evening with a brief introduction from Rabbanit Oshra Koren, the Dean and founder of Matana Sharon. I'd like to thank Oshra, and I also saw Rabbanit Malka Binas on the Zoom as well. So to thank Oshra and Malka for hosting this evening, and to thank Oshra also for being my mentor and teacher for over 16 years now. Matan is my second home and has been a source of strength and chizuk for so many, especially in these trying times over the last 9 months. Thank you to everyone at Matan, Rabbanit Malka, Rabbanit Oshra, all of the Matan team for your continued dedication. And thank you, Liat, who is always at the end, silently at the end of the Zoom. And overseeing tonight as well. So I'm going to hand over to Oshra for a few words of welcome.
Good. Thank you so much, Tanya, for your warm words and your warm welcoming. And of course, I'm so honored and excited to welcome you all this evening to the book launch of Mindy Wiesenberg. And Mindy, you know, your claim to fame with us is you are Tanya's mom, our beloved teacher here in Matan. And we really am so honored. We want to welcome you all to the launch of your book, Healing Pathways. And, you know, Mindy, I've heard so much about you over the years. And of course, we had the privilege of having you here in our Beit Midrash in Matan and Ra'anana, and seeing the nachat you have from Tanya's teaching, which is our nachat as well. And Tanya always told me what an incredibly strong and resilient woman you are. And we are privileged to host this evening. So thank you, Mindy, for choosing Matan as your platform to share the book launch. We are also so happy that we are partnering with another group of strong and devoted women, the Women of Emunah United Kingdom, having worked tirelessly for Emunah, that you've worked tirelessly for Emunah for so many years, and knowing the life-saving work they do for Israel's underprivileged children. So we thank you, the ladies of Emunah, and we feel it's really, really fit for us to do this together tonight. And Mindy is dedicating all the book profits to this cause, to Emunah. And we at Matan believe in Torah of Chesed, that our learning serves us in being more compassionate, caring, empathetic human beings whose Torah is practiced not just in the Beit Midrash, but in the outside world. We believe that Yahadut pushes us to action, of course. At Matan, we're always looking for innovative and creative ways to take Torah to the world at large. Baruch Hashem, even during Corona, we have managed to find ways of bringing our teachers to the many hundreds of our students all over Israel and all over the world who are in their homes, and we're learning Torah together. And we all pray that it won't be long before we can meet once more face to face and find healing in face-to-face Torah and Chesed. So without more of an introduction, I would like to say enjoy the evening and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much, Oshra. And thank you once again to Matan for hosting with grace and enthusiasm, as always, this evening. I want to just start with a few very short housekeeping memos. Please refrain, if possible, from sending messages in the chat during the lecture. It can be a little disturbing. If there are questions, I'll ask you to send them directly to me on the chat, not to everyone, but just find Tanya White and send them directly to me. And then at the end of the presentation, which will be around 40 minutes, we're going to leave a good amount of time for questions at the end. And I will then, Liat will open the microphones and you'll be able to direct your questions to my mum, and so send them to me so I know who to ask to open their microphones. I will also be sending links on the chat to where the books can be purchased in the various areas, UK, United States, and Israel, and those you will find on the link very soon. Okay, so I'm going to give a very brief intro, although my brother won't say I can ever speak for a brief period, but I will try to keep it brief. For those of you that know my mom, she needs no introduction. If you've met her, you know you have. It's not just that her loud or vivacious character that leaves an impression, but really, as I think we all know, and especially all her friends and family that are on the Zoom tonight, it's her quiet positivity, her joie de vivre, her love of life and others that leaves an indelible mark wherever she goes and whomever she meets. It's really actually quite miraculous that after everything she's been through, severe sickness, 2 near-death moments, the loss of her husband, and more treatments and challenges, then finally being isolated alone for now close to 10 months, and then another operation last month to remove yet more cancer, she has not lost this ability. And yes, as she always says, she's not superhuman. She has and will have her moments, her down days. But as we see in Tanakh, a Jewish hero is not someone who is perfect, but rather a very real human being who struggles, but learns from their challenges and is able to channel them towards some good. This is what my mother has done. She's taken her own personal experiences over the last 9 years, her hours upon hours of research, thought, and practice on healing, and channeled it towards helping others on their journey. This book that we're going to hear about tonight, Healing Pathways, is the result of that. Tonight, we're going to hear some ideas about the book, and one of the main themes that runs through the book is the journey from, and it's the part of the title of tonight's evening, is the journey from an external to an internal perspective. And we're going to understand that in our own journey as a global community, from isolation to inoculation, as we called it, we have been on both an external and an internal journey. We too have had to heal both psychologically, but also on a much deeper level, emotionally. We've had to heal physically, but also on a deeper level, psychologically and emotionally. And this healing, in a way, requires us first and foremost to become self-aware, to have self-knowledge and insight. As we enter Sefer Shemot this week, we find some really compelling narratives that I think in so many ways speak to us today more than ever. The people have been enslaved. They've been denied freedom of movement, their identity, connection for so many hundreds of years, and they're broken. But even in the midst of this unimaginable suffering and torment, there is a group of women who come to heal. They don't heal from the outside. They heal from the inside out. I'll explain what I mean. If you look carefully, you'll note that the root word ter'er, to see, repeats itself numerous times throughout the early narratives of Sefer Shemot, of Parshat Shemot, in particular relating to the women in the book. For example, the midwives see the babies, or re'itan al ha'avanim. V'tira'ena miladot et Elokim, which literally translates as they feared God, but it can also be to see God, when we're able to see God in places where we wouldn't necessarily expect to find him. Yocheved sees her baby and sees that he's good. V'tereoto ki tovhu. But Paro sees the basket. V'tereta teva b'tochatzuf. She sees the basket in the river, and then v'tiptach v'tereo et hayeled. She opens and she sees the child. She sees something other people don't see. She sees the child before she defines him as an enemy, as an Israelite. Every expression of sight here can be read beyond its literal meaning. To see here is to understand, it's to have insight, it's gaining perspective. It reflects an internal perspective and wisdom that impels each of these women to then act externally. Each of these women recognize that redemption comes from the inside out and not from the outside in. There's a beautiful midrash of the women. They bring the mirrors to Moshe for the Mishkan. And Moshe gets angry, and Hashem responds to Moshe's anger, and he says to him, these mirrors saved the people. The women took these mirrors to the men to emit desire in their husbands and then bring life into the world of sorrow and despair. Moshe sees the mirrors as vanity and lust, but the women understand that there's a whole nother level, and they see in the mirrors hope and redemption. When we look at ourselves in the mirror, we see the whole picture. They understand that we are more than just the parts that we can see from a limited vision. They understand that our externalities are just a portion of what makes us who we are. This idea, I think, is even more ostensible in the vicissitudes of our national journey in Torah, right? When we leave Egypt, we're externally free, but we're not internally liberated. And then throughout the books of Shemot and Bamidbar, we remain prisoners. We remain prisoners of our own slavery. It takes the demise and the birth of a whole new generation till we possess the internal mechanisms of freedom to enable us to enter our own land and build a society. Freedom is won externally in Shemot, but it's only won internally in the end of the book of Devarim. To heal from trauma, injury, slavery, illness, or any other malady requires two journeys. The journey, the physical external one, but also the internal one. In Shemot, the women in whose merit we are told we were redeemed, they already knew that this was the secret of redemption. Tonight, through hearing about my mother's journey and some of the exceptional ideas she brings from her book, we will gain insight as to how we each can apply these messages and ideas to our own lives, our own personal narratives, and perhaps even at this time of this global pandemic, which we find ourselves, we will be able to find some kind of resilience and hope. So without further ado, my hero, my heroine, my mummy, Mindy Wiesenberg.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I'm actually going to start by thanking Malka-Bina and Oshra Koren from Matan, not just for hosting this presentation, but as my daughter has so rightly said, for the mentorship that they've given to Tanya over the years, allowing her to flourish in the rich Torah environment that Matan provides to so many communities. As usual, Tanya, you've used Tanakh to frame and convey a central idea, and one that I will discuss tonight. And I thank you for your introduction. And I'm actually going to begin by quoting you, because one of your sayings, Tanya, is that you often feel that you learn more from your students than they do from you. And as I get older, it's often how I feel, and that I sometimes learn more from my children than they ever did from me. Okay, so to start, I want to set out the structure for tonight's talk. I titled the lecture, The Journey from Isolation to Vaccination, Healing from the Inside Out. And this year, we've all undergone a journey through the corona pandemic. I want to understand not just the externalities of the journey, but how I see it as affecting our internal systems too. The journey from isolation, which began over 9 months ago, to where we find ourselves now on the threshold of vaccination, it's a journey that so many ways I have been on over the past not 9 months, but 9 years, with the different challenges I have faced. And I hope that by sharing some of the lessons I learned about healing during that time, you can use to help you cope in these challenging times. I'll begin with an introduction explaining how I view the notion of healing. And then I will expand onto some of the major themes in my book, one of which carries all the way through the different pathways, and that is the idea of the external and the internal, and how we manage to move between the two. I'll then explore a common theme in the 10 pathways to healing that I set out in my book, and that's the notion of connection and energy. And I will show you how this is connected to so many aspects of healing, and give you some practical ideas to incorporate into your everyday life to help you. Now, from the outset, I want to say, as I pointed out in my book, I'm not a doctor or a counselor. I'm not a student of psychology or a holistic practitioner. I'm just a person who's gone through some difficult life challenges. And in that sense, I'm a student of life, a person who just wants to help others by sharing some of the ways that I have helped myself. I can't promise this knowledge will be any sort of miraculous cure, but I do know that when practiced authentically, it can be transformative on many levels. And that is what I offer in my book and in my talk tonight. My story and my journey are mine, but if they're meaningful to others, then that's all I can hope for. Okay, so let's dive in. As we all know, 2020 has been a year of enormous challenges for everyone in the world. It's perhaps the first time in history that the whole world has experienced one phenomenon that affected each and every person around the globe at the same time. The coronavirus has spread across every single country, including recently reported in Antarctica, and its impact has been felt by billions. So if there was ever a time that this planet and those who inhabit it need healing, it's now. But what does healing mean? Okay, I looked up in the dictionary 3 different definitions that I found. Number 1, healing is the restoration to health of a diseased, damaged, or unvitalized organism. Number 2, healing is the process in which a bad situation or a painful emotion ends or improves. And number 3, healing is the natural processes by which the body repairs itself. Now, this planet is certainly damaged in a physical way by so many things, from pollution and climate change to deforestation and species extinction. And we, as in the inhabitants of this planet, are certainly in a bad situation, having become diseased in so many ways, both physically and mentally, with millions of us ill, not just from corona, but from so many chronic and acute diseases that manifest in our populations. We need to restore the health of our planet and ourselves. We need to improve the bad situation. Yet the third definition describes healing as a natural process which the body repairs itself. This implies that there's some innate mechanism within every organism that's at work to correct itself when things go wrong. And we all know this. But if you cut yourself, once the wound's clean, the body will heal itself. It knows exactly how to do this through its immune system. But the problems arise when that system's not working properly. And this could be due to many factors. And it's some of these that I want to be I want to address tonight. And it's these that need to be addressed in order for the body to truly heal. But I want to say one thing at this point, is that it's important not to confuse healing with curing. Healing yourself does not necessarily mean your body will be cured of disease. Healing in the body is a holistic system where every aspect, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, that all come together to work in harmony. And this often happens when you accept who you are, understand why you're in this world and what you need to do. It is coming to a self-realization of your true nature. And it's very often only when you have some form of life shock that occurs, and which is an event which is so out of ordinary in your life, it actually shifts the paradigm of how you have been living that life. And it's only then that you'll come to realization that you need to go through some form of healing process to regain a new sense of balance in your life in order to become well. We all want to be well, to be free of disease, but how do we attain that state? Okay, let's stop for a minute and think about the word well. What is a well? It is a hole dug deep down in the earth to reach a source of water buried below the ground. It's a source of water that sustains life. In order to attain a state of wellness, you often have to dig deep down into yourself to find your vital source of energy, the life force that sustains you. And too often, it's only when facing a crisis which creates a fracture in your life that you start to dig deep down and search within yourself for that vital force. Sometimes a fracture can be when your body's broken in some way through disease or through a serious accident. And in others, it can be when your heart's broken through an emotional or a mental crisis. It took two very serious fractures in my life, my cancer diagnosis and my husband's sudden and untimely death, which act as wake-up calls for me to reassess so much in my life. And in order to heal, and cope and go forward, I had to face and create a new reality. I realized that I needed to heal myself, to change things in my life and repair myself. Now, there's a wonderful video that I came across as I've been looking at videos of the late Rabbi Sachs. I was looking through some videos of him and I found one of him talking about the singer and songwriter Leonard Cohen, who in one of his songs called Anthem writes these words: "There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in." And Leonard Cohen actually used a lot of biblical references in his songs, which Rabbi Sachs talks about. But this actually is a reflection of Lurianic Kabbalistic thought known as Shvirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels. Because when God created the world, the light was so intense that it shattered the vessels that were holding it. And inside those shattered vessels was a divine light. And it's the shattering that needs a tikkun, a repair, in order for the geula, for the redemption to come. Sometimes this is what happens when an event occurs which fractures your life into pieces. But that fracture is often an opportunity for allowing an opening to let the light back into your life. And this is when you need to recognize that the challenge you're facing is not a punishment sent to shatter you, but rather a wake-up call for you to acknowledge your vulnerability and adopt ways in which you can let the light back into your life. Now, for many of us, that a fracture happened back in March last year, when the consequences of the spread of the corona pandemic began to play out. And the disruption in our lives forced millions of people into isolation. and it made us realize just how fragile our world is and how vulnerable we all are. So I want to share a paradigm with you that has helped me on my journey that I think is so pertinent for the corona times, and that is the move from external to internal, and then through transformation, internally, outwards again. Through this, hopefully, you can repair a fracture and allow yourself to face the vulnerability as we travel from isolation out now through to the period of vaccination. Isolation, quarantine, lockdown, bidud, seger, whatever words you want to describe what we have been through in the last year, the underlying paradigm is one of separation, upheaval, and fracture of the existing patterns of our life. Some of us have gone through the very difficult physical losses of family and friends. For others, it was loss of employment or income or pressures of homeschooling. And all of us have suffered the loss of future plans, be it holidays, smachot to celebrate, spending precious time with our family, or just the lack of happy events in our diaries. The whole unpredictability of life has worn us down to such a degree that contemplating more than just getting through the day saps our energy. And it is this energy within the body which is the key to understanding so many of the ways that we can heal. Well before corona, any person who's been through an illness like cancer will know that some of these feelings are all too familiar because it's part of the territory. Having to isolate when your immunity is shot, when your whole blood counts are very low, being unable to plan too far ahead when you're going to have treatments and how you'll be affected by them. And of course, being totally drained of energy. And this was my world for so many years. But the problem with me at the time, as I was going through my treatments, was that my way of coping with it was by externalizing the whole process. I did not let the experience of going through all those difficulties penetrate deep into my consciousness. Once I had a treatment, I had the chemotherapy, that session's finished, I put the whole experience out of my mind. That was the mechanism I used at the time to get through what I needed to get through, and which counters very much actually the way I'm feeling about healing now. But I only came to realize that I'd externalized my experiences several years into my cancer journey when I was working with a new physiotherapist. She was helping me to clear an chest infection I had by working on me. But before she started, she wanted to know my whole cancer history. I was a new patient of hers. So I spent over 20 minutes telling her all the details of all the treatments I'd had, the setbacks, what I was doing, and so on. When I had finished my whole story, she looked at me and she said, Mindy, you've just told me your story as if it's happening to someone else, not to you. It was then that it struck me that I had not allowed so much of the pain, the discomfort, and the difficulties of living with cancer to penetrate deep into my psyche. In a way, that had been my protection mechanism for me to get through what I needed to deal with. I didn't want to face up to my vulnerability, but in a deeper way, I learned a lesson at that point that I could not fully heal myself if I did not internalize the situation. And this gave me a template for what a lesson means. Because for learning a lesson, you have to take some form of knowledge or experience from outside of yourself and internalize it. Through this internalization, you process this information, which allows a transformation to take place, whether it's in your thought processes, your physical responses, or your emotional state. In turn, this transformation will allow you to externalize it to your behavior and beliefs. It allows you to grow and heal by creating a new reality for yourself. As my cancer journey progressed, and then after Johnny's death, I was reading more and more about different aspects of healing, and in learning how the body's energy on a micro and a macro scale, I then understood that I could put into practice many different paths and different ideas to raise the body's energy. Through this, I could create a transformation which would hopefully improve my well-being and help me to heal. Now, I want to take this idea of internalization forward in a metaphorical way. Those of you who've seen my book cover, which was so beautifully designed by Natalie Friedman Weinberg, you will see that I chose to use a butterfly motif on the front, because that for me represents the ultimate expression of transformation, where internal change creates a new reality. How does a butterfly come to be? It starts off as hatching from an egg into a caterpillar, which grows voraciously, devouring everything around, stripping them of their nutrients until it can't grow anymore. And then it begins to spin a cocoon around itself. It is inside this cocoon where everything the caterpillar has digested from the outside breaks down and disintegrates. And slowly a transformation starts to happen through special cells called imaginal cells, which grow the new parts needed for transformation into a butterfly. Now, I couldn't get over this when I actually read about these cells called imaginal cells, because it's the most wonderful way of describing how a caterpillar imagines itself into the future as a butterfly. And when the transformation is complete, the butterfly emerges from the cocoon and flies away. And this internalization in a cocoon of matter from the outside, which allows for transformation, is then externalized as a different organism. The butterfly is something amazing that emerges from that transformation. But what is important to recognize is that any form of internalization creates a situation where you have to acknowledge what is happening. And it's that acknowledgement which is critical to being able to move forward. When we were placed in isolation this year, we all felt separated in some way from the people and activities that were so much a part of our lives. And that created a deep sense of loss and grief for us. A grief is very important. It is the process by which we internalize loss, and something that absolutely demands acknowledgement from whatever way it occurs. The physical loss of loved ones during the pandemic was the ultimate separation and the most devastating and tragic loss. Yet everyone has suffered some form of loss, and you need to grieve over this, for you begin to heal when you process grief. Grief opens you up and changes you. And within the paradigm of the shattered vessels I talked about earlier, it's this breakage and loss in your life that can often open you up and allow the light to come back into your life. But how? How do you journey through your grief and loss and the loss of expectations you've had about your life? And this is where I come to many of the pathways I discuss in my book. Everything from cultivating gratitude to forgiveness to the power of your emotions and your thoughts, the wisdom of your soul, rekindling joy, healing foods, and the nature, of course, of faith. I'm not going to discuss all these tonight, as you can read about them in my book, but I do want to talk about an underlying idea to so many of them, and that is the idea of connection and energy. Every single living organism transmits an energy signal. Each cell in our body contains 0.07 volts of electrical potential. And considering that we've 50 trillion cells in our body, that is a huge amount of electrical potential, which if it can be harnessed, it can produce deep states of healing. Now, we know that when we're having a hard time dealing with difficult challenges, we often feel as though we have very low energy levels. And sometimes that energy is not flowing correctly through the body and gets blocked. There are many physical practices like yoga and Tai Chi, energy freeing techniques like tapping. These all work on the physical body to try and loosen and open up these blockages. But what's important to grasp is that our body's energy is deeply, deeply connected to the emotions that we feel. And there have been many scientific studies which illustrate by creating positive thoughts and emotions, this can lead to an improvement in well-being. And likewise, it's important to know that negative thoughts can lead to a downgrading in our health. But what is essential to understand that just thinking in a positive way is not enough. Everybody says positive thinking, you've got to be positive. Thinking positively is not enough. You have to connect those thoughts to your emotions, because on a deeper level, on a much deeper level, there are chemical pathways that work between the two of them. And it's this connection between your thoughts and your emotions that can raise or lower your energy levels. Through the newest science of epigenetics, it's possible to show how our emotions and thoughts can create actual changes in our genes, and these can affect our immune system. And it's the immune system which governs so much of the physical healing in our body. Now, this is really quite a deep topic, and I'm not going to go into all of this now here. But for those of you who are interested in the science behind all of this and how it works on a cellular chemical level, a lot of these ideas were explained in much more detail in some of the books that I quote in the bibliography at the back of my book. But there is one important fundamental issue which I talked about back in July in our last session, but it's so important that I feel I have to repeat this now, because this is essential to understanding how the body's energy works. Almost every emotion that you can feel can be categorized as either one of love and one of fear. Now, if Tanya, can I ask you to share a screen share? I can't do screen share on mine, but if you can do the screen share on yours and put up the table, which you'll see in front of you. There are two sides to this table, one headed love and one headed fear. Now, all the emotions of love, I've just listed under there a few of them: gratitude, joy, acceptance, amazement, passion, blessing, sensitivity. These are all emotions associated with love. And on the other side, you have the emotions of fear: hatred, anger, jealousy, anxiety, disapproval, regret, doubt, insecurity, vulnerability. All these are emotions of fear. And it is very important to recognize these two categories, because what it has been shown in numerous scientific studies is that emotions of love transmit higher energy levels in the body, and emotions of fear lower the energy levels. And if you can cultivate emotions of love, then it will not only improve your energy levels, but it will also create positive effects on the healing mechanisms in the body. But and you can screen share now, but just talking about emotions isn't enough. You need to really feel them deep down inside, i.e., you need to internalize them. And one of the ways you internalize emotions is done by intention. The Hebrew word for intention is kavanah, and perhaps it's most associated with tefillah, but really you have to understand that it's important to recognize that any mitzvah, or indeed any action we undertake, if it is carried out with deep intention, it is this intention which directs your energy. If the intention is made with love, then that will raise the energetic level of the body and its surroundings, creating what I suppose you could call good karma. But if the intention is made through fear, then it creates negative energy. That's why stress, anger, frustration, and so many of the associated emotions of fear that we experience during isolation depleted our energy resources. Internalizing our thoughts through our emotions highlights a very important mechanism, and that is how our hearts and our brains are connected. Back in March, I wrote in my blog that one aspect of self-isolation is that it gave many of us an opportunity for self-reflection and trying to understand what we wanted from our lives. You might think that being in isolation engenders separation, but you can view it differently. For as self-reflection turns you inwards on yourself, you can begin to understand the wisdom that resides inside your soul. And this is your guiding force or intuition. And through it, it's important to realize that in fact, we are connected in a very deep sense with everyone and everything in this world through waves of energy. We can't see this connection, just the same way we cannot see signals that connect our mobile phones. We can't see the signal that transmit televisions and radio broadcasts, but the energy is there, the energetic waves, and there is an enormous amount of healing in these connections if we open ourselves up to it. Just think about why Tehillim groups are initiated to pray for those who need healing. Think about all the coincidences in your life that you feel are just coincidences, but so often these are invisible connections through which thought and emotion have brought that connection about. There is energetic power there, and we can tap into that by linking our intentions and our thoughts with our emotions. We often think that our heart is the emotional center and our brain is the place where all our thoughts originate from. Yet the latest science has shown that in fact, in our hearts, we have 40,000 neurite cells. These are actually neurites like you find in brain cells. These can think and remember independently from the neurons in the brain. Now, we've been conditioned to see the world through our brain, yet there is a need to connect with our hearts. We can process information very quickly by accessing this heart intuition, as we don't have to go through the logic and the fear that resides in our brain. We can communicate in the language of the subconscious, and this is where our healing begins. Studies have shown that by connecting thoughts of the brain with emotions of the heart through deep intention, we can create healing frequencies. Now, for any of you who are interested in this whole area, there is an organization that was set up 30 years ago called the Heart Math Institute, which was set up specifically to research all the science behind this and teach people exercises in how to connect your brain and your heart. I think Tanya's going to put the link, if you are more interested in this, into the chat at some point. But it's important to know that heart wisdom is something that was so much a part of the ancient world and so many of the oldest religions, including Judaism. But it's something that has got lost, especially in the world, especially in the West, as the world got more secular. Now, by total coincidence, when I was listening to Tanya's Zoom share on Tuesday last week, she talked about when the Tanakh was translated into Greek, the Hebrew word lev was taken to mean the heart. Yet in Western thought, this was seen as a separate organ from the brain, which is the thinking organ. But in the Tanakh, there was no such dichotomy, for the heart and its emotions were understood as part of the process of human thought and reason. Just think about the number of times it's written in the Torah and in our tefillot, "Ve'ahavtacha et Hashem b'chol levavecha u'v'chol nafshecha." You should love your God with all your heart and your soul. We recite every day in Aleinu, "Ve'yodata hayom ve'yoshavta el levavecha ki Hashem hu Elokim." You should know this day and take to your heart that Hashem is the only God. It doesn't say you'll know this through your brain, but rather through your heart. For this is not just an emotional command. It's one of understanding that the heart and soul have their own wisdom. And this turning inwards to the wisdom of your heart has an enormous healing effect by taking that wisdom, processing it, and externalizing it to your choices in life and the way you interact with others. With all the choices you make in life, you need to ask yourself, am I doing this from a place of love, or am I doing this out of fear? Just as two very small examples. Your friends phone up to invite you to go out for an evening together, halavai, after Corona and lockdown. Now, do you decide to go with them because you love being in their company, or is it because you're suffering from FOMO that you fear you'll miss out by not going? When you take a new job, are you doing this because you love the work and the company, or because you're worried about being unemployed? You have to examine what your motives are for the choices that you make. The more your choices are made with an intention of love, the more you hone your inner intuition and develop greater connection. The more you make them out of fear, the more you're using survival instincts, which are negative. They have negative intentions, and these are less intuitive and less connected. If you're constantly living in fear, it lowers your energy, giving little room for any form of healing. Now, to overcome fear or any form of vulnerability, the first step is to acknowledge that it exists within you. But then you have to try and relinquish and let go of those emotions the best way you can. By trying to work on yourself and cultivate emotions of love, this can help you overcome fear. Learning to love yourself is a gateway to open yourself up to love others, and this becomes a circle where through acts of chesed you give to others, you begin to nurture a more positive respect and love for yourself. There is another important emotion of love that has enormous healing benefits, and that is feeling gratitude, appreciating the blessings in your life, even the small everyday things. Practicing gratitude is a form of internalizing the simple words, thank you. Giving thanks with deep emotion to those around you for their love and support, and also giving thanks to a higher power, to Hashem, for all that you have been blessed with in life. All of this helps you to cultivate gratitude. And again, there have been so many studies on this that have illustrated how the power of gratitude, if it's practiced regularly, will improve your immune system and the sense of well-being. Gratitude and cultivating it has played an enormous part in my healing journey. And indeed, gratitude meditation is something I do every day. One of the mechanisms of internalization is meditation, where you still the outside noises in your life, all the noises from the outside world, and you connect to your inner world. And it's something that has helped me enormously. And as I write about in my book, meditation uses the breath and deep breathing exercises to connect you with your inner soul. Now think about the Hebrew word for to breathe, linshon. It contains the root letters nun, shin, and mem. And these are exactly the same root letters of one of the words for the soul, neshama. As with so many words in Hebrew, I do not believe that this is a coincidence. For deep breathing is the way to connect inwards to your soul, to your inner self. But you don't necessarily have to spend time meditating to practice gratitude. But there's a simple exercise that everybody can do. At the end of each day, just write down 3 things that you are grateful to for that day. It could be that your children didn't have a fight that day, or that your boss complimented you at work, or you completed a task that was hanging over you to finish. Anything small or big. If you keep this up every day over several weeks, I guarantee you, you will begin to see things in a different light. For what you appreciate will appreciate. There is a serious problem with so many people in that they have a mindset of scarcity. They feel either that they do not have enough or they are not enough. And this can be turned around by practicing and internalizing gratitude, for it places you in a mode of sufficiency thinking by realizing that you do have enough and you are enough. And this changes your attitude as to how you view life. So many of the pathways of healing your life are related to the attitude you adopt and the choices you make. How you approach any challenge that you face in life will depend on your attitude. Now, we started the journey with isolation, and I've discussed how the isolation turns you inwards. And from that, you can begin to connect to your deeper self. And now we come to vaccination, which we hope all of us will be receiving soon and will in many ways be the end point of our journey through this epidemic. Let us all just think for a moment about the mechanism of how vaccination works. It works on the principle of injecting a substance containing part of the original illness into the body, which then uses its own defense mechanism, the immune system, to create antibodies to protect itself from further infection from that disease. In that sense, it is triggering the body to build up its own defenses, its resilience to the disease. Any challenge that happens in our life can be overcome by building up our own resilience, our own defenses. If we learn to understand the key difference between a challenge that is happening to us and a challenge that is happening for us. If we think of a challenge that is happening to us, we put ourselves in victim mode. We don't see the possibilities that we have available to us to deal with it. We close ourselves off to internalizing what that challenge can teach us. But we feel it's outside of our control and there's nothing we can do to change it. But if we see the challenge as happening for us, then we become a survivor. For even though the circumstances of it can be out of our control, what is within our control is how, by internalizing that situation, we can learn from it and therefore transform to adopt an attitude of action. And the difference between the two modes is one of choice, choosing your attitude. Now, the corona vaccines were miraculously developed in such a short period of time, and we all pray they will work, but they came about by learning as much as we could about the virus. Internalizing that knowledge, the scientists and doctors internalized that knowledge, and seeing how they could transform that knowledge through scientific means to a usable defense mechanism. And it's something we're all eagerly awaiting for so that we can return to some form of normality. 1 minute, hold on a minute here. Didn't I just describe about how internalization could lead to transformation so change could happen? So should we all be vaccinated so that we can return to how we were living before the pandemic? Should there now not be some kind of change in how we were living? Have we not learned any lessons from what we've been through? If we are to undertake some kind of healing as individuals, as societies, and indeed the planet itself, does that not imply that it's not going back to business as usual? During the past year, when human activity was limited, we've seen some amazing examples of healing going on in the physical world. For example, the reduction in air pollution. They found dolphins swimming in that awfully dirty Venetian lagoon that so many of us might have seen when we traveled to Venice. Those are just two examples. Although many things have been extremely difficult, there have been some upsides to it. People have been working from home, not spending endless hours commuting. People have spent more time with their families, been more active in their communities, done things they wouldn't have had time to do when they were too busy. They have begun to appreciate so many things. So perhaps we need to think about those positive, beneficial things as we go forward and try adopt some of the healing mechanisms that can help us to create a better future. But by practicing healing of ourselves, can we really affect change in others and indeed the planet itself? And to try and answer this, I'm going to go back over 200 years, almost 200 years, to the times of Rabbi Yisroel Salanter, the founder of the Mussar movement. As a young man, he set out with such ideas to change the world, but he realized this could not be achieved so easily. So he set his sights on the country where he lived, and eventually just the town, the community. But when he realized that even this was too big a project, he said the place one needs to start is within himself. If he could change himself, then this would affect those around him to change. And so the Mussar movement was born. And so it is with healing. We need to begin by working on healing ourselves and the relationships we have with those around us. And in turn, this can influence and change healing on a wider scale. When you find the key to the truth of who you are, when you find yourself by helping others, when you learn to love yourself and give gratitude for all the blessings in your life, when you practice forgiveness, appreciate life, and so many other things you internalize, they can help you to transform any challenge in your life for the good. And I want to close by quoting one of my favorite insights that I heard many years ago from Rabbi Mervis, that actually he spoke about this just last week at the Limud conference when he discussed the nature of resilience. Take two Hebrew words, oneg, meaning a pleasure, and nega, meaning a plague. They each have the same three Hebrew letters, ayin, nun, gimel. With oneg, the ayin is at the beginning of the word. With nega, the ayin is at the end of the word. Because where you place your ayin, meaning your eye, is how you will perceive what is happening to you. Any challenge in life can be seen as good or bad. It just depends on how you choose to look at it. And any challenge we go through can create within us the possibility for transformation. We need to leverage what we've learned from the positive things that we've learned from this pandemic to go forward into 2021, being more kind and compassionate to ourselves and to those around us. For many challenges remain, but even more so this coming year will therefore need to be one of healing, not just on a personal level, but on a global level. And with that, I close my talk and I hand over to Tanya to see what questions have come in and to open up the microphone for anyone who'd like to ask any questions.
Thank you. I think you'll all agree that that was a wonderful insight into just a couple of very small elements of my mother's amazing book, which expands on all of these ideas through her 10 pathways in the book to healing, each pathway giving us various stories and various ideas, and coming together at the end with a summary, and it's well worth seeing it all in the book itself. I haven't had any direct questions, but I'm going to open up Leah. Okay, the microphones are open, so if anyone wants to just ask any questions or make any comments, with pleasure. Anyone at all?
I sent you a comment, Tanya.
Oh, did you? Okay,
Jenny,
so okay,
Jenny.
so what?
Jenny,
just you can go ahead and ask it.
It was just a comment. It was just saying that a lot of your ideas are very similar to Dr. Edith Eger, who says that you have to wake up in the morning and say you love yourself, and that we all suffer in life. We're all going to have suffering. A life involves suffering, but it's your gift how you choose to deal with it.
Yeah, that Jenny, you're so right, because I just read recently her new book.
Yes.
And during my journey with all the things I was going through, I read her original book, The Choice, which was an amazing book. And then my niece happened to have the book, The Gift, which is her latest book, where she formalizes it into 12 different ideas. And there is so much that I have learned by reading about the trials that other people have gone through. Sheryl Sandberg in Option B, Melanie Reed in her incredible diaries after she had her accident, and about Miriam Peretz and her book that she wrote about the incredible Miriam song. By reading what others do, one of the lines that came through to me, and especially it was echoed in The Choice, which was a book that Edith Eger wrote, was that, reading this, you don't want to say, oh my gosh, what you went through was much worse than whatever I've got to face. You don't want people to think like that. You want people to say, if she can do it, so can I. And that is exactly how I felt by reading about other people going through difficulties in their lives. And you're 100% right about that, Jenny. Reading what other people have written, that's what I feel I want people to get from the book, that they can get through things. You just need to get yourself the right tools and the right attitude. Thank you, Jenny. I don't know if there's anyone else.
Is there anyone else that wants to open up their microphone? Anyone?
Norman, I don't know.
Mindy.
Yes, hi. Oh, Benny, hi. This is Benny, is my machutten in New York. Isolating in New York, and we're both desperately hoping to get to. We have a common grandson who has got a bar mitzvah in Israel middle of February, and the two of us and Dorothy are desperate to try and get out.
Right. Wonderful presentation, Mindy. Very inspiring. I remind myself that I just read from Rabbi Sachs, one of the last articles that he wrote about the approach to tefillah. There are two approaches to tefillah. One is to ask for things that you don't have, and the second one is to show appreciation for what you do have. So a lot of what you said really brings that brings that message home, that if more people would daven, not asking for something, but for saying thank you and appreciating what they have, that their tefillah would be much more satisfactory to them and to Hashem.
Benny, you have hit the nail on the head, and I want to tell you, I don't know if there's anyone in the family of Lady J, Lady Jakobovits, who was the most amazing person. I mean, really, she was one of these irreplaceable people in this world. And this was one of the messages I got from her, and so many people got from her, that we're davening to Hashem, asking him for things. We should be davening to Hashem to thank him, really, for everything that we have in life, because giving gratitude is the beginning of anyone's journey towards healing. So thank you so much, Benny, for bringing that up, because it's a very, very important issue. Okay.
Is there someone else? If not, I'm going to summarize and close the evening. Is there anyone?
Tanya, is there a way of saving all the chat, all the comments on the chat? Because
yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Chat.
Hi,
So
can I
that's
just say, Mindy, you're just so eloquent. I'm sure everybody is just, I'm so humbled by your inspiration, your way that you've dealt with it yourself, and that the way you're able to explain it to everybody else. Unbelievable. I wanted to ask
I love you.
I love you.
Terry. You always send me such amazing messages, and it's the inspiration.
Because you're amazing.
You've just highlighted to me one of the things that, as people say to me, oh, Mindy, you're so inspiring. But what you don't understand, and I keep trying to tell people like you, Terry, who are forever in touch with me, asking me how I am, all these amazing family and friends that I have, all the love and the concern that comes to me are energetic waves which heal me and allow me to improve and to send it back out to people. That's this circular transmission of love and emotion. And I really cannot thank you enough for it. Really.
But I wanted to say, for what your Machutten said, and about thanking. And I just queried, when we hear somebody is ill, we cannot stop with the Tehillim. The pressure is incredible. And I just wondered, maybe there is a particular Tehillim to say how grateful we are if people recover. I feel guilty to stop my Tehillim just because somebody seems to be doing okay. So, just the gratitude of, do you hear what I'm saying?
That is such a brilliant idea, as well as having Tehillim groups, or even, I have a wonderful Tehillim group from Ner Yisrael, which is just down the road at Tully Mann's house, literally down the road from me. We meet every Rosh Chodesh. Well, we meet virtually now, we do it. But it's such a brilliant idea, Terry, to, at the end of Tehillim, where we have a list of people that we daven for, they always say all the names, we should then have another list of people who, Baruch Hashem, are doing well, and we should offer a hoda'ah prayer, a thanksgiving prayer for them. And I think that's something that maybe the people who organize Tehillim groups, I don't organize it, but maybe that is something that can be thought about, speak to a Rav about it, and certainly speak to Rabbi Zobin or Rabbi Ginsbury, and to see whether this is something that has a thing. I've just seen Elisheva has put on the, Elisheva, hi Elisheva, you've just put in the chat, Tehillim 104. I don't have that. I don't have my Tehillim in front of me here. Actually, that's not true.
Mummy.
Yeah.
I do.
Esther wanted to ask. Esther, did you want to ask it, or do you want me to ask it? She said, thank you for such an enlightening talk. I would have loved some personal anecdotes relating to some of your initial reactions to your personal cancer experiences and your bereavement relating to Johnny. I think
okay,
what Esther meant is, did you always possess this resilience, or were there moments of crisis and despair?
I have to tell you something. As Tanya said at the beginning, I have had my very, very down times as well. Really, when, you have days when you wake up and all I sit here is crying and saying, Johnny, where the hell are you? I want Johnny back. I want my husband back. I want my health back. All the things that you go through. Of course I have bad days. There's no question of it. But where did this strength in me come from? And I attribute it to two things. I am totally blessed, and anyone who is from my family who is on this Zoom will know I come from Rottenberg women. My grandmother was a Rottenberg, right? That was her maiden name. And my grandmother and my mother and my aunts and so many of the women in our family are such incredible, strong role models to me, that I have seen this in life. My aunt, who went through many, many, many years of illness, bore it with the most incredible fortitude and strength. Auntie Susie was one of a kind, as is my cousin, my mother's cousin, Sarita Langdon, who is going at the moment also. She's gone through so much. These are people who've given me examples, true heroic examples of what it is to have strength, to have koyach, to have that inner strength to move forward with everything. And I have to tell you, my father died when I was 35 and my mother was 64 at the time, the same age more or less as I was when Johnny died. And the strength of character that she showed, how she got through it, she was forever an example. She was my ultimate role model, my mother, in how to deal with adversity in life. And the same with my mother-in-law, who went through the whole, she was put on the kinder transport when she was a teenager. She said goodbye to her mother in Germany, never saw her mother again. She perished in Auschwitz. My mother-in-law went forward as much as she missed her. She went forward to create an amazing life for herself. Norman, I think you want to say something.
I've got two. Sorry, Norman. Yeah, we're gonna take Norman. Then I've got two more questions, and then I think we're gonna bring the evening to a close. So Norman, and then I've got two questions after that.
Mindy, it is difficult not to use superlatives, but I have a question. If you had not had cancer and had not lost Johnny, would you ever have thought of writing the book?
Norman, you've hit the nail on the head. I even write it in my book. I don't think I would have written to this book. I mean, if I could turn the clock back physically and not have to go through that cancer, I'd turn the clock back in a minute. But mentally, spiritually, emotionally, I have developed so deeply by going through the process of cancer and bereavement that I don't know whether I would want to go back. I would not write that book in a second if I could have Johnny back. Believe you me, I'd do that swap in a blink of an eye. So if I could have Johnny back and not have written the book, there wouldn't even be a question, right? But I wrote that book in a way as my therapy to get me through the bereavement and the cancer treatment, which unfortunately, as you know, a month ago, I had to have another operation. And we're just praying that things now will stabilize again. But I have changed so much. That fracture that happened in those two fractures changed me. And it initiated my search to find out so much more about how I could heal. And as I said, if I could just turn that clock back, I would do it in a second, not write the book and have Johnny back. Believe me.
Could I just add one word? I have not lost my wife and I have not had cancer, but your book will mean as much to me as it will to somebody who has had both.
Thank you, Norman. I'm very, very touched by that, Norman. And please give a kiss to Ruth from me.
Right.
I miss her. I miss seeing all my wonderful Emunah friends and family in Israel. Please give her a hug and a kiss from me.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Norman. Mummy, we've got three more questions. Samantha Whitcomb has asked me to ask you, this has been very motivating and encouraging. I'm wondering which of the 10 points that your mum discusses in her book was the most challenging for her?
I think that the grief chapter, that I start with my illness and the next chapter is about my bereavement, which frames everything. And I think writing those two chapters were perhaps the hardest because that was discussing the fracture, what I went through. The illness and the bereavement were the two fractures, right? What I wrote about later on, how I was healing, in a way, writing about it was healing. Although writing about the illness and about the bereavement, losing Johnny, were therapeutic for me, writing about the healing was what was the hopeful side of everything. It's what gave me hope about my emunah, about the food I was using, about gratitude, about appreciating the joy, rekindling joy. I have a whole chapter about awakening to awe and rekindling joy. And that is, I write about, one of the things I write about in there is about laughter and how Johnny made me laugh. And that made me think back on Johnny with happiness, you know. So I think the beginning bits were perhaps more difficult, but then as I went through, and I sort of wrote bits and pieces over the years and then put them together. It took a while to get the format of how I wanted the book to be. But I really feel as I was writing, I was imbued, I know this may sound strange, I was imbued with some sort of Ruach HaKodesh, because I felt God was directing me to get my thoughts out on the paper as I did. Because I'm not, I haven't written books before. I've written academic papers before, but I've never written a book before. So I really, really feel it was some form of Ruach HaKodesh that got those words on the page. Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to ask Lonnie Zaram, please. She's got a question. She's going to open her microphone.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for that, Mindy. That was very, very interesting. A lot of really good points there. But I know certainly in my generation and in younger, that we're certainly open to a lot of the things that you direct here that are really mental health issues that can help people get through really difficult situations. So my question is to help people who aren't so used to getting help, mental health help, what is their first practical step to help them on this journey? Because this is wonderful, but sometimes that first step is really, really hard for people. So what would you recommend or advise? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And it's in a way a difficult thing to answer, but I think, as I mentioned, if anyone has any issue in life, whether it's mental illness, whether it's relationship issues, whether it's alcoholism or any form of addiction, the first step they always say is acknowledging you have an issue that needs to be dealt with. The first step along any road to any healing or any dealing with any issue is the fact that you need to acknowledge you have this issue that needs to be dealt with. And, I think sometimes it's very hard, particularly if somebody's going through depression or any of the, I think particularly mental issues can be very difficult to acknowledge. But that is the first step. And then the next step, I think, is to approach it in the manner that is suitable for the person. And this is a totally individual issue, because what is right for one person may be totally wrong for another. One person may be very artistic, and therefore some form of art therapy might work for them. One person may be somebody who likes to read poetry. And there's some marvelous books at the back of the book that I read, which were sort of prose by somebody called Jeff Foster, who writes the most incredible, he went through very serious depression, and he wrote about the ineffable nature of life and love, and it was just amazing to read what he writes, because you can connect to it. So it's finding a way that it can connect into that particular person. What does he or she relate to best? And I think that's the way to begin the journey. I hope that answers it, Lonnie. Okay.
Okay, and I've got a question from, I don't have a name, but I've only got 005765. I don't know who that is, who asked me to ask,
me.
how do you...
Sorry. Hi.
Hi.
I think it's me.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
Julie
Yeah.
Conn from London. Yeah.
Hi, Julie. Do you want to go ahead and ask?
It is me. I don't know why it comes up as that number. I'm really sorry. I don't know why my name doesn't come up on my laptop. I don't know you very well, Mindy, but I'm part of the NER community, so I know your name. So hi, that was a very inspiring talk. I have been through cancer myself, and what I wanted to ask you was, how do you deal with day-to-day thoughts of the cancer is coming back? Because I think this is the hardest thing for somebody who's been through something like this, to, any kind of cancer. In terms of all part of the healing, what do you say to yourself? I guess my question is really internally. Does that make sense? What actually happens when
I went through this because my cancer came back 6 times. It kept coming back. Every time I had something, I had a few months of remission, and then it would come back again. And then I had to go through different treatments all the time. And I think the way that you can deal with it is, once you've finished a treatment, accept it, acknowledge you've had that treatment, and enjoy your remission. Don't dwell on it. And in a sense, if you start to go inwards, although I do encourage you to go inwards, but sometimes going inwards too much, where you dwell on negative thoughts which create fears in you,
Yeah.
is not a good thing. You
Well,
have
that's
to
the hard
relinquish.
bit.
That is, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying any of this is easy.
Yeah,
None
yeah.
of this is easy. It's all difficult, but you have to try. You have to start somewhere, right? And then one of the books that I recommend, which you can see I've got a million things in here. This is one of the key books I recommend to anybody who is diagnosed with cancer. It's called The Cancer Whisperer. And my lovely friend Linda was the one who gave this to me. Ironically, at her 60th birthday party, she presented me with a present, and this book changed my life. And anyone who's got cancer, even if you're halfway through your journey, even if you're in remission, I strongly advise you to buy this book. It's available on Amazon and on the Book Depository if you're in Israel. It's called The Cancer Whisperer by Sophie Sabaj. And she absolutely gives you tools and ways and ideas of what she went through and how she took herself forward. Because you have to, she has the strap line, I have cancer, but cancer doesn't have me, right? And that is, you have to learn to enjoy those times when you are well, and cultivate as much as you can and gratitude. Once you start to cultivate gratitude, cultivate all those feelings of love, and find the right way, because what works for one person, as I said before, might not work for someone else. So you have to navigate. It's a journey where you're navigating your way through it all in so many different ways. You have to find what works for you. But I really do feel the paradigms of fear and love with your emotions will help in many, many ways.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that's answered it.
Okay, we've got a final question for those of you that are still on with us. This is the last question, and then I will briefly finish with a very 1-minute thank you and summary, and then we are done. So, Robin.
Hi, Mindy. First of all, it was amazing, and Yashir Kochech.
Oh, Robin, hello. I haven't seen you for so many years. And when I saw Lukins come up, I thought, oh my God, and Efrat looks so much like you.
And I just came back from LA last night.
And where are you? Are you in Los Angeles? Are you in Monsey?
No, I'm at home. I'm at home, but we were in LA. My niece got married, and we just were with Efrat's family.
That's right. Lovely. So you're back in Monsey. Anyway, lovely to have you.
I have to say, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. My husband, thank you. My husband and I both had COVID in the spring. I was totally asymptomatic. I didn't think I had it. He had it. And having gotten over it and had antibodies, we have been traveling and visiting. And I say being with our grandchildren is what keeps us going.
Believe you me, I know that, and I'm missing that very, very much at the moment. Please, God,
so
soon.
I have a question, and just hearing the other questions made me think of it. I have a grandson who's 14. He was bar mitzvahed last year, not a frat son, another one. And he actually shared his bar mitzvah with a classmate who davens in the same shul. And so we know this boy very well because he's a good friend of my grandson. And he was diagnosed with brain cancer in September, and we've all been davening for him, and he's recovering. What would you suggest for, you know, it's more like the parents. In other words, a parent's perspective is different than the actual person who's feeling.
This is a very hard question, Robin. And you know what? In a sense, you need to speak to my sister Zena, because I, Baruch Hashem, have not had anyone in my children or my grandchildren who've been ill. So I've been dealing from it from a personal perspective. Unfortunately, my sister Zena has gone through several cases of cancer with her children and grandchildren.
Oh my
And she
God.
was absolutely unbelievable the way she dealt with it all. It was just amazing. And I was in awe of her, how she dealt with it all. And I often think it's sometimes harder for a parent or a grandparent to see somebody suffering than for the person going through it themselves. And I think it's what can I say? I think you can't keep telling the child to stay positive or child. You have to allow a child to express his feelings in the way that he feels and give him space to do that, to let them, allow them that emotional space around them to say how they're feeling, to understand their feelings. But you have to try and stay positive and encourage them to do things which they feel happy doing. I really can't offer more information. As I said, I'm not a counselor, and this really needs expertise with somebody who's helped somebody through it. In fact, one of the people just put on the chat when answering before about Lonnie, when she asked about dealing with somebody going through mental issues, you need professionals. Baruch Hashem, there are amazing organizations now. I know in England there's Camp Simcha, which helps with children who are going through illness. I'm sure, I think there are in America, there are similar type of organizations.
Yes.
And I think that really to engage the help of professionals in this type of thing is absolutely vital, because they have the expertise and the knowledge best how to approach this. And I think anytime going through anything, I mean, I myself went to a counselor at the High Cancer Center to help me, and it was counseling, it wasn't a therapist as such, but I tried lots of different types of physical therapies which helped me, Reiki and a massage and cranial osteopathy. They had some wonderful practitioners there. So there are all different ways that you can use to help them get through it. But I think acknowledgement is a very important thing. Acknowledging whether it's a child or an adult, and the people around them need to acknowledge it and not hide things away. We're in a different generation now. My parents' generation, when anybody was ill, you never talked about it. Nobody knew. I mean, it took me years until I discovered that my grandmother, when she died, when I was 24, I didn't even know she had breast cancer. Nobody talked about those things in those days. Now it's a much more open, people do talk about it, but there's ways of talking about it. You need to approach it in the right way. And that's where professionals come in, people who know how to deal with it. I'm so sorry to hear about this. And I wish refuah shalema for him. I really wish refuah shalema. Lovely to talk to you, Robin. Thank you.
Okay, so I think, Mommy, is there any concluding remarks you want to share with us?
I just would like to say to every single one of you who tuned in today, a huge thank you. I am very overwhelmed by the response from everybody. It's really given my soul to internalize the love that's come from all of you to help me, please God, go forward with my healing. And if in some small way what you read in my book can help you, then I'm thrilled that I've spent this very difficult time, for me, gave me the time and space in my isolation to collect my thoughts and write my book. And I'm just so happy that it's come to fruition. And if it can help others, that is my bracha. Hashem has blessed me with the gift to be able to give that to others. Thank you so much to everyone. Thank you to Tanya, and thank you again to Matan. And as Oshra mentioned in the beginning, all the profits from the sale of the book are going towards British Emunah that supports the Emunah projects in Israel, a cause that is very, very dear to my life. And for many, many years, having been involved with Emunah, seen the children and the projects they support, I know how vital their work is, and I'm delighted that the money will go towards them. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to just conclude the evening by firstly thanking each and every one of you for being on the Zoom. As I was sitting here listening to Mummy and specifically listening to her talking about gratitude, and something that she and my dear grandmother taught us and all the extended family, this notion of gratitude, I suddenly felt a huge gratitude to all of you sitting here listening, our family, friends, community who have been there for Mummy, especially when we haven't been able to be there physically, helped her, looked after her, given us incredible emotional support. And I just, on behalf of all of us, her family, want to thank all of you for everything you've done over the last 9 years. And I also should have maybe said this at the beginning, but to thank Hashem for bringing us to this moment. And it really is a Shechianu, a moment of not just recovery, but thank God of real growth that Mummy's been able to bring this book to the fore. And I want to finish just by saying that as we approach the month of Shvat, it reminds me Mum and Dad's favorite vault that they always told was based on their wedding invitation, a tree with birds on it. And they would always tell us that a parent's job is to give their kids roots and wings. And I really thought about that as I was listening to Mummy, that when we internalize the lessons of the home we've been brought up in, it gives us the internal strength to grow wings and fly away. And when we take those internal roots and move with those external wings to new grounds, that's what it is to grow. And Mummy, I want to finish by saying that we, your children and your children-in-law, we spread our wings a long time ago, but we continue to draw incredible strength from your roots every single day. You're our rock and our foundation, and we pray that Hashem continues to give you strength and health to continue sharing your incredible wisdom for many, many years to come. So once again, thank you all for being with us tonight. And since my brother Avi's muted, I'll do what he does, and I'll finish by saying, you've heard it all, now go and buy the book. So thank you all for coming, and we hope that we will see you once again in person very soon. Take care.
Thank you.